This is Room 301, a podcast ran by digital agency group The Digital Maze. Room 301 is a podcast all about SEO, PPC, website design, social media, and everything in between. Our aim with this is to equip marketing leaders with all the know-how to run and lead an effective digital strategy. My name is Rob. Let's get into it. Okay, so today we're going to talk about all things content and all things writing. I think that's the right way of saying it. So I'm Rob. We haven't got Beth today, but we have got my colleagues Rebekah and Claire. So Rebekah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Rebekah. I have 8 years marketing experience spread across content, SEO, PPC, and social media. But content is really the thing that I've been specialising in over the last couple of years.
Claire?
I have probably more years than I'd like to admit in digital marketing and SEO. So I've been with Boom for around about 7 years, and the Digital Maze since it was set up.
Perfect. So when we talk about copywriting for SEO, what exactly are we talking about here? I think some people think it's just words on a page, but it's so much more than that. So, in your words, how would you explain copywriting for SEO and the benefits of doing so?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. We could spend hours talking about it, couldn't we? But I think sort of the main points is that it's not just about words on a page, it's about building relationships, and that's between brands and customers, but also between web pages so that Google can really build that picture. And this is something that Claire knows a lot about, so I won't go into too much detail on that. It's about communicating, inspiring, teaching people, maintaining engagement, because as we all know, it's a lot more expensive to get new customers than it is to get loyal customers. The bottom line, I guess, is that it's advertising, finding ways to increase visibility, and making sure that we're translating content so that people can understand it, but also that search bots can understand it as well. And then the last bit, I guess, is reporting so that you can prove that what you're doing is making a tangible difference.
I would completely agree with all that. For me, some things that are really important are simplicity and structure. Looking at the structure of your overall content and of individual sentences. The focus of your overall piece. So are you talking about something very broad, or do you have a tight focus on a particular topic? And I'd have to say it's quite an art form, really. It's very different from the writing style that we're taught at school or university.
Mm-hmm.
Got you. So, what are the benefits of having a dedicated copywriter over, say, just a sort of topic expert writing the copy?
I think there are definitely benefits to both. And often the way we work with our clients, we will work together, especially in technical niches. So we'll have the SEO copywriters like myself and Rebekah who understand a wide amount about how the search engines work. And we feed this knowledge into the way the piece is written, the way it's structured, and the way we create the whole piece. And that ultimately will affect the results that we get from organic search. So an example of this was a piece of very technical writing that we were doing with the client. The idea came about from our research due to a content gap compared to some of their competition. We provided a brief to structure the work, and the client then wrote it out from a subject matter expert point of view. But they felt like it needed quite a lot of background information. And they were quite concerned when they'd done that it was too similar to some other content on their site, and then felt a bit nervous to publish it. So as an SEO content writer, I then gave it a review, restructure and refocus the piece. And for example, included internal links to the other more detailed articles that they already had on the site that backed up that background knowledge. And actually the piece was a really great success when we launched. There was no cannibalization, and they captured the featured snippet for the target area we were going after. and it's quickly become one of their most popular pieces of content on their site. So I think
So the main benefit
really well together
is knowing how Google works, what it wants to see, but also what the user wants to see, what's useful for the user as well. So
Definitely.
you can write all you want, but how to format that for the web, how to make sure the user finds it engaging, how it works with the rest of the website in conjunction as well is going to be quite important. So, a lot of our clients, and I talk to, potential new customers of ours on a daily basis, and most of them are, high-level marketing directors, CMOs, or marketing managers, and we talk to them about the content on their website, and they may not know that they have content that is working for them or not. So, and we often suggest a content audit. So, in your words, what is a content audit, and why should potential marketing managers, directors, consider doing that?
So, firstly, I think content audits are becoming more and more important, especially after Google's helpful content update recently. What it is a process of gathering data about your entire website or just a section of the website, like, for example, all the content on your blog. And then you would use this data along with a human review, so lots of reading, to actually assess what's working and what isn't. And it is quite a large task. It takes a long time, depending on how much content you've got on the site. But there are some tools like, for example, URL Profiler that make the job easier, collecting all the data for you, so it keeps it all in one place. But the overview that you get from this type of work, I feel really helps to give context to what's working and what's not. I think we're often quite familiar with our top content pieces from analytics, but that doesn't show the ones that don't get any visits at all. So you might not realise some things really aren't working particularly well. And sometimes you can be putting quite a lot of time and effort into those, and it's not really giving you any return. So the content audit will really help to highlight that and show a bigger picture in terms of your strategy and what's working well.
So what are you looking for specifically? I'm going to aim this one at Rebekah.
Yeah. So there's a few things that I look at when I'm doing a content audit, and like Claire says, they take a very long time. It's really easy to fall down the rabbit hole, but I always say that you should never rush a content audit because you just learn so much, especially if you're taking on a new account or a new topic. Reading what's been written before and learning gives you a really good starting point to jump off. But going back, when I start doing a content audit, it's to gain an overview of all the content and its recent performance. And then we use that to do a couple of things. So we create an optimization strategy to increase rankings for current content that's already doing quite well, maybe targeting some new features that have come about since publishing. So people also ask boxes is something that we target a lot for older pieces as well. There are some search terms that will have come up since we published a piece that will fit in really nicely that we can try and target. And for hub content, I spend a lot of time looking at assisted conversions and seeing how we can boost those as a really nice win for the clients. And then I look at a way of either updating or repurposing content, merging content, or retiring content with dignity, as I like to call it, because I don't think content's ever a waste of time. Sometimes it serves us for a short time, sometimes it serves us for a long time, but then we should retire it with the dignity it deserves and then pass that link juice on to some other piece. And another thing I look for is content gaps, and that goes really well hand in hand with competitor research to figure out how we can fill in those gaps and serve the audience a little bit better.
You mentioned hub content. And that's a strategy we use for a hell of a lot of our clients, if not all. What describe to the audience what that is in your words.
Yeah, I love hub content. I've talked about it for so long.
Hub and spoke, to be specific,
yes.
Isn't it? Yeah. Specific.
I guess it's taking all the information that would really help an audience. So it could be information before they buy, as they're buying, after they've bought it. It's essentially like a huge customer service. And that's a lot of content that if you put it all in one document would just be too broad and too long, and it wouldn't have very good engagement. So from a top level, hub content is just individual articles that sit on a particular topic page that people can use to find out more information. We do a lot of internal linking between them, don't we, Claire, so that we can help the search bots understand the links between them and build those entities together.
Yeah, so it's all about organising content pieces around a topic. so that people can find sort of further reading. If they start to read about a subject and find it interesting, we'll then link through to another more detailed article on perhaps a slightly different area. So generally you'll have your hub, which is your main topic area, that has lots of different, more detailed articles kind of going off that. So that's the hub and spoke organisation. And then each of the spokes might be interlinked as well. So they will link across to different articles that relate to each other. So it's really making this kind of cluster of content that all relates to each other.
So I guess a hub, just to give it some context, I guess a hub, let's say you were doing an e-commerce store for men's fashion, a hub could be, I don't know, men's trousers. And that's really where you want the traffic to go to, because that's where the purchasing happens. That's where the products are sort of housed. And a spoke could be what, the search terms or the questions that people are asking along that sort of buying journey. So how do I get my men's trousers tailored? What size leg should a 6 foot person man wear? I don't know what they would be. Obviously, there's plenty of tools to sort of
size guides, fitting
fitting guides, but it's all the questions that people might ask before making that purchasing decision, before they buy their men's trousers. And all those articles add weight to that main hub, don't they? And that hub being the men's trousers. And all of a sudden you'll start to see traffic going in the direction that you want it to go for that particular product category. And obviously with that comes more sales, more revenue, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the hub and spoke strategy. I know we've gone a bit off piece there.
Yeah, you can also go retrospectively with it as well. So I know that you could, in the past, I've had it where you find out a blog posts that are similar in topic. Around fitness, for example, trying to run a marathon, you could take old blog pieces that were done individually, put those into one blog post as a hub style, and that kind of revitalizes them as well and gives them another chance. It's
interesting because the webinar we ran recently, which was all about the cost of living crisis, which I promised myself I wouldn't mention, but I just have, and how that affects your marketing strategy. One of the things you mentioned, Rebekah, because Rebekah was our speaker for that webinar, was putting more emphasis on the content of the buyer's journey. A lot of it is hub and spoke, isn't it? It's about what are the people going to be searching before making that purchase, because people, we're led to believe that people are going to take longer to make a purchase now because there's much more consideration that's going into it, because they haven't got the disposable income potentially that they used to have. So that people are asking all sorts of questions about all sorts of different products. And I think that's where this strategy can become quite strong, not only in a sort of economic crisis, but at all times as well, but particularly now. So going back to content audits, obviously you explained what it was. What does that inform for you? What are the actions you take following that?
So general actions would be to consider removing any content that might be outdated or perhaps inaccurately representing the business now. So having done quite a few content audits, you'd be surprised at how quickly things change, and some things that perhaps were news in the past may now be something that you don't want to talk about anymore. But you do always have to approach this sensitively. I think, as Rebekah mentioned earlier, you have to think about how this might affect members of staff in the business. Is it an important part of the company's history? So certainly don't want to remove things that still have an important place. But if they're really serving no purpose to the direction that the business is going in at the time of the audit, then it might be time to retire that content. We look for ways to improve or refresh content that has potential, to combine content on similar topics that might create better or more detailed resources. Or, like we just talked about, creating a bit of a hub and spoke around a certain topic to interlink some of these articles that have lots of potential. And then also to look to refine the future plans based on what we find is working. So often it can be a bit surprising what's bringing the most traffic and even revenue in. So it can really help focus on what those things are and how you can take that forward into future content plans. But every audit is very different. It's obviously unique to each business that you work on. So some have shown me potential for a whole new area to be created on our website, like, for example, a Meet the Team page or a charity CSR page. And others have just really clarified that future strategy. Sometimes the content is really good, but it hasn't always been written with an SEO focus. So back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of how SEO copywriters can help to just structure this and focus on the way people are actually searching for the topics that you want to write about, can help it perform better. And some just tend to show how much content writing has changed over the past few years. Things have to be a much higher quality these days to succeed in search and to serve users, really. And a few years ago, you could get by with a bit less detail, but when you come back and look at these things now, you realise that actually they need a lot of work to match up with today's standards.
Yeah, I think we're going to find that more and more as well. I think it's going to become obvious the people at the top of the SERPs are going to be the ones that, you know, took action quickly, invested quite heavily in copywriting. And I think realistically, copywriting and content production is arguably, you know, the most important skill set in any marketing strategy now, because you need good content for not only SEO, you need to write good copy for your paid advertising, your landing pages, so on and so forth. So it's definitely becoming more and more important. I guess the question I get asked is, you know, is it, even if your business is quote unquote, you know, typically a boring business that some people would consider boring anyway, does that present a problem to the likes of you guys who do this day in, day out when it comes to writing?
It can do, but I think that's more because you kind of get it into your head that there's going to be nothing to write about. So you kind of stop yourself from dipping into that creative side. So I always give 3 pieces of advice on this. The first one is something that we do a lot, and that's brain writing. So you get 4 or 5 people together. You have 5 rounds and 3 minutes to just write down random ideas. They can be ridiculous.
I need to get in on one of those.
They're so much fun. They're brilliant.
Not sure how useful I'd be though.
Well, I mean, the first one I did, at the end, so essentially what you do is you have your 5 rounds and then you go through all of them and you pick and choose which ones you think have good merit. And the first one I ever did, not a single one was chosen, and I upvoted it and still no one chose it. The second one got a bit better. But the idea is that you bounce off each other. Yeah. And that really helps to get some ideas on the page. And in half an hour, you can have 100 ideas, and some of which will be utter trash, but some will be really good that you wouldn't have thought about if you were just stuck in the really rigid, okay, here are the search terms, what can I build? Or just kind of getting out of that sort of rigidity, I guess. Another piece of advice I always give is to tell people that there's always an audience for everything. And I think it's a really underrated skill of copywriters, is that, you know, we can write something as if we care about it more than anything else in the world. And that's a really hard thing to do, but it's quite an underrated skill. So telling yourself that there's an audience for everything, that someone will find value in what you're writing, is another piece of advice I would give. And then the last one is to change your perspective a little bit on what you class as high performance. Particularly for niche sites, the search volume isn't going to be as high. So normally, if search volume's low, you might be like, I'll skip that one and I'll use a header that's got a lot more search volume, because that'll work for the bots. But for niche sites, that search volume isn't always there. So focusing on people also ask boxes in that regard, it changes the perception of performance, because those search volumes may be lower, but you know that that's what people are asking for and looking for, so you can build your content around that. So just changing your perspective a little bit would really help. That's my advice.
Cool. I'm going to ask another off-topic question, one we hadn't discussed previously, but I like to keep you guys on your toes. So I know, you know, we've got a lot of clients in a lot of different industries, which technically makes you guys sort of subject matter experts in a lot of different things, you know, doors especially, and so on and so forth. And I know there's a massive amount of research that goes in from your side to make sure that you can understand and add the right level of merit and accuracy to your articles and to your content that you write. At what point, because I know we do this, I know we've got copywriters on standby for certain subjects. So, for example, we actually haven't, but if we were to get a customer who was in the, let's say, cryptocurrency space or something like that, something that we don't feel like we're comfortable enough to write about, at what point do we bring in those external experts who can really add weight to that content? And at what point do you guys stop feeling comfortable with the subject that you're writing about, so to speak?
I think I will leave that one to our head of content.
Yeah.
The copywriting.
I think there are certain subjects, like, for example, finance. If you
Yes.
don't have that kind of a background, it's not something you can just pick up with a few hours of research. You really need that background.
Your money, your life is something we've banded that
and
around recently, haven't we?
expertise. So it's a case-by-case basis, really. And I think the way we work at Boom and the Digital Maze, where we have clients in certain niches, we've been an account manager with them for, months and years.
Yeah.
We often start to build up that knowledge over time. So it might be that we start working in one way with the client.
If I need a new door, I know who I'm going to.
Definitely. But yeah, as we build up that knowledge over time, then things might change. So I think there are definitely some of those topics.
Is it industry specific? I know you mentioned finance there, and again, we've done a few pitches recently where we've discussed your money, your life, where it's really crucial. I think, healthcare, pharmaceutical, that kind of thing. It's really important to make sure you get the content spot on. I suppose it is a question, is it industry specific as well? Do you feel less comfortable when it is a subject like that?
Sorry, go on, Claire.
No, I think I was going to say, I agree that really does need to be written by an expert.
Yeah, 100%.
And also fact-checked by an expert. So those are the areas that, whilst we might have some input into, content structure and providing a brief, really what's written needs to come from somebody who really knows a lot about that area. We would never want to mislead accidentally. So it's really important.
Yeah, I think that's testament to sort of the ethics in the business as well. We're not going to write about just anything. We're not going to work with just any client. It's really important to us that we can add value to each individual client. And if we can't, from a content point of view, do what we need to do. If it's really important we get the information as accurate as possible, then we will source external writers. And we've certainly got an army of them waiting, who we trust and that we will bring in if we need to. So
yeah, I think that's why content audits are so important and why they take so long, is because we learn absolutely everything about a business and what they stand for from the content audit. And when I do on-page optimization, for example, I always start with the product pages because that's where you get the most information. That's where you can learn. And there are things that we can do if there's something that we're not sure about. We were talking about the other day, weren't we, how content is taking a lot longer now to create. We did some research and there was graphs that just basically showed a huge upward trend in how much time it took to write just a blog post.
Yeah.
And that's because of how accurate and how much research needs to go into it to get that authoritative voice. And if it is a topic that's, your money or your life, or needs really strong trust signals, we can get other people in, or we can track down experts that can check our work or provide quotes, and then we can back that up with their, everything that they've achieved in their lives. So, there are ways to do it. I just think a lot of the time people maybe don't see how much time goes into that.
It is interesting. Again, I'm going way off piece there, but tone of voice as well, because I know we've done some, particularly you, Claire, have done some work for our own tone of voice recently. Does that affect how you write as well? So let's say we brought in a client, or you're writing some content in a tone of voice that just is completely polar opposite to how you are as a person. Does that pose any issues for you?
Certainly can be challenging, yes. And again, it's something that takes extra time and effort to get that right. So, yeah.
I think in the team as well, we can have similar tones of voices in our own writing, but we can also have very distinctive differences. So sometimes it's about finding the right person on the team that would find it easier to write in that tone of voice.
Well, that's the last of the off-piece questions that we hadn't talked about prior to this, but I think we're just going to quick fire some questions at this point. So, question number 1. If you could write about a topic for the rest of your life, which one would it be? If there is one.
Yeah, I put so much thought into this. And I can't narrow it down between 3. So there's sustainable marketing, which I genuinely think I need to get like a swear jar for every time I mention it. And I'll make so much money. I'll save so much just for talking about sustainable marketing. I started vegetable growing, and I've been talking about that a lot recently, and there's always something to learn there. And the third thing would be my cat, because he always, every day I've got a new story for him. So I can't whittle it down to any lower than that.
I'm going to have to be really boring and say it's too tough for me. I really feel like I thrive on variety, so I don't think I could pick.
I was really expecting at least one of you to say doors, but obviously no. Okay, fine. AI, artificial intelligence. Are you worried about it taking a job in the long term? I can't see it personally. But
I would say I'm not hugely worried at the moment. There are some AI tools out there doing some really amazing things, but generating your content using these is still against Google's guidelines. And there are some tools out there that can detect whether your content's been AI generated, and these are really accurate. I've tried some of them out. So if they can tell, you bet that Google can. I prefer to try and see these advances as a benefit to us in our jobs. They can be really good for inspiration, for getting something started and getting over writer's block, and just generating those ideas, really.
Pet peeve? For written content?
Not just in life.
Not just in life, no. We'd be here all day, wouldn't we?
So I've got two. Mine are too much waffle and not answering questions with a direct answer.
That's me out of the job.
Mine is it's a bit more philosophical, I guess, but it's sort of the worthiness of a piece. So I was talking to you, Claire, the other day, that every piece that's published emits carbon into the atmosphere. So when I read a piece and I think, does that really deserve to be there? Is that worth the carbon it's creating? Which goes back again to me always talking about sustainable marketing. But yeah, that's my biggest pet peeve, unworthy content.
Any tools that you know that can identify sentence structure and grammar improvements to make content better? I know we use one called the Hemingway app, I think, but specifically for SEO, are there any tools that you'd like to reel off that really help that?
Yeah, so when you're trying to write well for natural language processing, I would say there's no one tool that I've found so far that can do it all. A few tools that I like to use regularly are the Hemingway app. It's a nice free tool that can help you simplify your writing, get a better readability score, which is always good for writing online. Grammarly, which again has a free version just to check spelling and grammar. Google's own NLP tool, which is really useful for letting you know how Google is interpreting a piece of work that you're writing. So which entities it feels the most salient and things like that. It's a really useful to check. And one of my favourites at the moment is Surfer SEO, which helps give some writing guidelines, terms to include and that kind of thing based on what you're hoping to rank for. And then I think it's really important to have the human input as well. So getting another person with SEO and copywriting skills to proof your work, which I think is why our team is so valuable, because we all help each other to improve our work and make a better piece at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I love Grammarly. It's my all-time favourite tool.
Saves my life.
Oh my
with email writing daily.
When people ask me how to spell things, I'm like, I can't check Grammarly in this time.
I mean, it's your job.
Well,
it's your job to know how it's spelled.
And after this, I'll be getting fired. Yeah, I love Surfer SEO. I do get really competitive with it though, trying to get that score as high as possible. But my best tool, this is going to sound really highfalutin, but I do think it's your gut. We've been doing this for years now. And you know, those tools are great for pinpointing what search bots are looking for and what data that can show you what users are looking for. But as a human, which these tools aren't, if something is or isn't going to work based on that gut feel, and if you should add something in there that it's maybe not recommended but will really enhance the piece. And yeah, that's why, like Claire said, it's really important to get different eyes on a post, to check that the flow works more than anything, and to check that it works well and that you haven't written something in a way that's confusing, just a kind of human first approach. I actually wrote a piece for Search Engine Journal on how spelling mistakes, going back to our Grammarly chat, spelling mistakes can actually help crawlers learn. So while I'm not saying to do it on purpose, sometimes a couple of spelling mistakes out there here and there.
They love me then, won't they?
Well.
So the next question's on complicated and technical niches, but we've kind of covered that, so I'm going to move forward. Featured snippets. First of all, what is a featured snippet?
I always think it's the first kind of box that comes up that has usually a picture and then a header and a small definition that answers your question.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes described as like position 0, so it's above your general organic results, and it might be a quick short answer to a question, or it might be a instruction list, it might be a bullet point list. Basically it's what Google thinks is the best answer to that query. At
a glance, the best answer. If I wanted one, what's the first thing you're going to do to my content?
I think we'll probably approach it a little bit differently. I get quite technical with it, so I always put the header as a H2, and I aim for around 50 words because that tends to be what fits into it. I know that some people like to put a bit more in so that it has that ... so people have to click through. And also, if someone already has a feature snippet that you want, it's probably a good idea for me at least, to try and aim for the same format. So if they've used bullets, you might want to use bullets, unless, as I said before, your gut feel is telling you that it needs to be in a different format. Then, feel free to do what you think is best. But they're kind of the initial approaches that I take to it.
Yeah, I think that's all really useful, and it really depends on the featured snippet that you want to win. So question answers tend to follow the format that Rebekah's mentioned, around about 50 words. But SEMrush did a really big study a few years ago, and they provided some guidelines on how to win the different types. So lists tend to have about 6 items, whereas paragraphs, they said around 42 words, so perhaps a little bit less than we might have thought, but things may have changed since that study was published. But really, being concise, being direct and straightforward, and also thinking about what types of information would that question be expected to have. So if we're asking something like, how cold should I set my fridge? You'd expect there to be temperature. You'd expect to qualify that as degrees or Fahrenheit, or maybe include both. So even if you keep that short, if your answer's a bit more vague, it's probably not going to appear in a featured snippet. So you've got to be really direct and to the point with your answer.
Bit of a sidebar. Did anyone else get really upset when SEMrush said that it's pronounced SEMrush and not SEMrush? I
still say SEMrush. I don't care what they say. That's what it is. And it will continue to be that.
They're going to send you a cease and desist for mispronunciation.
I remember when, again, separate point, but I've obviously been doing this for sort of upwards of 10 or so years now. And I remember talking about SEO back in those days, and people always there was a general feeling that keeping your website's content fresh, no matter how you kept it fresh, whether it was with, total drivel content, but that was the way to keep yourself, ranking high. That was the way to keep you visible in the search engines. But there is genuine reasons as to why freshness of content is a good thing to do. So from you guys who produce content day in, day out, what are those genuine reasons as to why we should keep our websites fresh with content?
I think there's a few. It's really hard to consistently build an organic presence without adding new content. So we need to be constantly looking for new and different search queries. 15% they say of all Google searches have never been searched before. So there are always new ideas to look at and new topics within your niche, whatever topic you're working on. Freshness, as you've said, is a ranking factor. So it's really important to have up-to-date content to support whatever business you're working on. So how fast these things go out of date will be very unique to your industry Some are much more fast moving than others. But it's always important to keep up with what's going on in your industry with either fresh content or updating your older content. For example, statistics might change that you've mentioned in the past. So you want to go back and update those and keep them fresh so that people are getting a really up-to-date and useful resource. So updating the content really is as important as adding new. And I'd say that's all goes back to the content quality, because if you publish something and just leave it there, it doesn't show that you're being careful about looking after your website, providing a great quality resource to your visitors. So adding, pruning, as we mentioned earlier, and improving content all shows Google and your readers that you care about the quality of what you're putting out there, that you're keeping it relevant and you're keeping it up to date and useful.
And we hear EAT, EAT, banded around the office quite a lot. Now, what is that, first of all? And how important is it when writing new copy to sort of adhere to those guidelines?
Yes, it's really important. So expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. I always get that middle one. There's so many T's in there. Authoritativeness.
That's why we say EAT.
Yeah. Yeah, life's too short to say the whole thing. Yeah, I think it's really important. Firstly and foremostly, if Google is telling you outright to do something, you're kind of a fool to ignore them, especially when so much they don't tell us and you have to kind of suss out yourself. There's a reason why they're telling you to do this. And I think that's because Google's ultimately trying to serve its readers, not the people that are, it's not even trying to serve the people that are paying for ads. It's trying to serve the people that are making the search queries. So if they're telling you to do something, then you know that that's going to be part of their processes. And also the internet, it can be a really scammy place. I think that's why a lot of small businesses tend to struggle to get that trust up. So building content with strong EAT is a great way to put users' minds at rest, and maybe just a thing to convince them to give it a go and invest.
So what are examples of expertise, authority, and trust? Is it things like award wins? Is it how long somebody's been in business? Is it if you're a doctor, or I imagine there's a million different things, but
so many, yeah. So I was looking into team pages recently, and it was things like what qualifications do you have, what jobs have you had, and essentially putting a LinkedIn account onto a team page just to reinforce that. And then obviously when you link to that team page from any piece of content that someone's written, Google's putting those entities together. What was your question again?
Examples. I mean, for me, I'm a salesperson at heart. So for me, it's kind of the list of credentials that you reel off when you're trying to impress.
Yeah.
And you're trying to say, look, I am, or we are the real deal. Yeah. It's awards. It's testimonials. It's
making sure that you're clear about who said these things. So if you are writing content, making sure that that's properly attributed to the author.
Yeah.
And then there's a page that explains who that author is and why they're qualified to talk about that particular things.
Yeah. We did a piece recently on whether internal doors increase the value of your home, and we couldn't actually find a solid answer, could we, in any Google searches that we did. So we went to a really high-end interior designer and asked for their opinion based on their, I think it was 15 years experience in the market, and then we created a piece around that. So
did it add value?
I think it did, didn't it? Yeah. I went off on a huge tangent with her and talked about loads of stuff. But in her opinion, it does add value. But there's loads of things you need to do around that, which if you want to find out, you can read our blog post about it.
Here we go.
But yeah, just sort of reinforcing that you're not out there to make a quick buck.
Cool. Last question. So, you guys are writing about all different things and stuff and topics on a daily basis, and you must have learned some really interesting things that you probably thought you'd never have learned if you weren't in this kind of role. So what's the most interesting thing you've learned whilst writing copy for either a client or just in your personal time?
I think recently I've learned, I was doing a piece on agriculture, and it's all about how developed worlds got developed status by investing in farming and agriculture, and how I think it's underdeveloped is the term, countries who are trying to get developed status are also investing in agriculture, and that's sort of like the thing that everyone starts with. That's probably the most interesting. One of the most useful ones I've learned is that my door for under my stairs wasn't working. It kept had to like lift it up to close it. So I was like,
we need a door count. That's 4 times now.
Next one, sustainable marketing club. Yeah, so it's quite fun actually. So I fixed it, and my husband was like, "Oh, you fixed it," and I was like, "Hair swish, yes, I fixed it."
Yeah.
I think we do pick up a lot of things. I will quite often come out with a random fact that I've learned through writing for work, and we do work across a lot of different industries. So something I've found quite interesting recently is learning lots about the current housing market, how that's been affected by the pandemic, as well as how what's happened then is now shaping what's happening now. So these little snippets of information stay with us from so many different areas. You'd hope that we'd be experts at the pub quiz, but it never tends to come up.
I did win a pub quiz once by naming all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was the one question I answered and it won.
But did you write?
And that had nothing to do with your job, did it?
Exactly,
You're a massive fan of me.
I've had a quick look ahead. I've not done a quiz since because, no more good stories to tell about it. So.
Right, tidy. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Learned a lot. Hope everybody who listened did too. Obviously, if you want to follow us, we're at The Digital Maze on Twitter, LinkedIn, and all the different places you'd expect. Claire, Rebekah will link all their sort of information in the podcast notes. They are both plug, because I haven't mentioned it enough. They both write for Mars and Search Engine Journal and all the top publications. So, they've always got something interesting to share or write about. So, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again soon.